Sermon 3, Commentary, Part 2. The need for the Prophet's Caliph and the mode of his appointment. After the Prophet of Islam, the presence of such a personality, i.e. a Caliph, was inevitable, who could stop the community from disintegration and guard the religious law against change, alteration and interference by those who wanted to twist it to suit their own desires. If this very need is denied, then there is no sense in attaching so much importance to the succession of the Prophet that the assemblage in Saqifa of Banu Sa'ida should have been considered more important than the burial of the Holy Prophet. If the need is recognized, the question is whether or not the Prophet too realized it. If it is held he could not attend to it and appreciate its need or absence of need, it would be the biggest proof for regarding the Prophet's mind to be blank, for thinking of means to stop the evils of innovation and apostasy in spite of having given warnings about them. If it is said that he did realize it, but had to leave it unresolved on account of some advantage, then instead of keeping it hidden, the advantage should be clearly indicated, otherwise silence without purpose would constitute delinquency in the discharge of the obligations of prophethood. If there was some impediment, it should be disclosed, otherwise we should agree that such as the Prophet did not leave any item of religion incomplete. He did not leave this matter either, and did propose such a course of action for it, that if it was acted upon, religion would have remained safe against the interference of others. The question now is, what was that course of action? If it is taken to be the consensus of opinion of the community, then it cannot truly take place, as in such consensus acquiescence of every individual is necessary. But taking into account the difference in human temperaments, it seems impossible that they would agree on any single point. Nor is there any example where on such matters there has been no single voice of dissent. How then can such a fundamental need be made dependent of the occurrence of such an impossible event, need on which converges the future of Islam and the good of the Muslims? Therefore, the mind is not prepared to accept this criterion, nor in tradition in harmony with it, as Al-Qadi Adud ad-Din al-Laji has written in Shara al-Mawaqif. He says, you should know that caliphate cannot depend upon unanimity of election, because no logical or traditional argument can be advanced for it. In fact, when the advocates of unanimous election found that unanimity of all votes is difficult, they adopted the agreement of the majority as a substitute for unanimity, ignoring the difference of the minority. In such a case also, it often happens that the force of fair and foul, or correct or incorrect ways, turns the flow of the majority opinion in the direction where there is neither individual distinction nor personal merit, as a result of which competent and personal persons remain hidden while incompetent individuals stand forward. When capabilities remain so curbed and personal ends stand in the way as hurdles, how can there be expectation for the election of a correct person? Even if it is assumed that all voters have an independent, unbiased view, that none of them has his own objective, and that none has any other consideration, it is not necessary that every verdict of the majority should be correct, and that it cannot go astray. Experience shows that after experiment, the majority has held its own verdict to be wrong. If every verdict of the majority is correct, then its first verdict should be wrong, because the verdict which holds it wrong is also that of the majority. In these circumstances, if the election of the Caliph goes wrong, who would be responsible for the mistake, and who should face the blame for the ruination of the Islamic polity? Similarly, on whom would be the liability for the bloodshed and slaughter following the turmoil and activity of the election? When it has been seen that even those who sat in the audience of the Prophet, the Holy Prophet, could not be free of mutual quarrel and strife, how can others avoid it? If, with a view to avoid mischief, it is left to the people of authority to choose anyone they like, then here too the same friction and conflict would prevail, because here again convergence of human temperaments on one point is not necessary, nor can they be assumed to rise above personal ends. In fact, here the chances of conflict and collision would be stronger, because if not all, at least most of them would themselves be candidates for that position and would not spare any effort to defeat their opponent, creating impediments in his way as best as possible. Its inevitable consequence would be mutual struggle and mischief mongering. Thus it would be possible to ward off. Thus it would not be possible to ward off the mischief for which this device was adopted, and instead of finding a proper individual, the community would just become an instrument for the achievement of personal benefits of the others. Again, what would be the criterion for these people in authority? The same as has usually been, namely, whoever collects a few supporters and is able to create commotion in any meeting by use of forceful words would count among the people of authority. Or would capabilities also be judged? If the mode of judging the capabilities is again the very common vote, then the same complications and conflicts would arise here too, to avoid which this way was adopted. If there is some other standard, then instead of judging the capabilities of the voters by it, why not judge the person who is considered suitable for the position in view? Further, how many persons in authority would be enough to give a verdict? Apparently, a verdict once accepted would be precedent for good, and the number that would give this verdict would become the criterion for the future. Al-Qadi Adud al-Din al-Liji writes, Rather, the nomination of one or two individuals by the people in authority is enough, because we know that the companions who were strict in religion deemed it enough as the nomination of Abu Bakr by Umar and of Uthman by Abdul Rahman. This is the account of the unanimous election in the hall of Banu Sa'ida and the activity of the consultative assembly. That is, one man's action has been given the name of unanimous election and one individual's deed given the name of consultative assembly. Abu Bakr had well understood this reality, that election means the vote of a person or two only which is to be attributed to common, simple people. That is why he ignored the requirement of unanimous election, majority vote, or method of choosing through electoral assembly, and appointed Umar by nomination. Aisha also considered that leaving the question of caliphate to the vote of a few particular individuals meant inviting mischief and trouble. She sent a word to Umar on his death, saying, Do not leave the Islamic community without a chief. Nominate a caliphate for it and leave it not without an authority, as otherwise I apprehend mischief and trouble. When the election by those in authority proved futile, it was given up, and only might is right became the criteria, namely, whosoever subdues others and binds them under his sway and control is accepted as the Caliph of the Prophet and his true successor. These are those self-adopted principles in the face of which all the Prophet's sayings uttered in the Feast of the Relatives on the night of Hijrah, at the Battle of Tabuk, on the occasion of conveying the Quranic chapter Al-Bara'ah, Ayat Tawbah, chapter 9, and at Ghadir, the spring of Khum. The strange thing is that when each of the first three caliphates is based on one individual's choice, how can this very right to choose be denied to the Prophet himself, particularly when this was the only way to end all the dissension, namely that the Prophet should have himself settled it and saved the community from future disturbances and spared it from leaving this decision in the hands of people who were themselves involved in personal aims and objects. This is the correct procedure which stands to reason and which has also the support of the Prophet's definitive sayings.